Picture a father helplessly staring at his 5-year-old daughter's severed hand. Baskets full of children's hands being carried to European administrators as proof of productivity. 10 million African souls screaming from graves that Europe pretended never existed. They fed you lies, poisoned your mind with sanitized fairy tales about European civilization, while they buried the cries of our ancestors. While they force-fed you romantic stories about the Statue of Liberty and European progress, in 1885, a blood-soaked Belgian king was claiming African territory 80 times larger than his pathetic little country. This monster would orchestrate a campaign of systematic extermination so vicious, so calculated, that it makes the horrors of American slavery look merciful. But they made sure you'd never know. They scrubbed the blood from their history books, erased the evidence, and spent over a century programming you to believe their lies about bringing civilization to Africa. Today, we're ripping away their carefully constructed deceptions. We're exposing the Belgian Congo massacre that powerful people have desperately tried to hide from you. Every word they taught you about European benevolence in Africa, pure, calculated propaganda designed to keep you ignorant of their crimes. King Leopold II of Belgium had watched every other European power build vast, profitable empires while treating Africa like their personal treasure chest. France controlled Algeria and West Africa. Britain ruled India and expanded globally. Portugal held Brazil and Angola. But Belgium had nothing. And Leopold couldn't stand watching his fellow Europeans get rich off African blood while he sat on the sidelines. So Leopold studied their playbook. He watched how they used missionary work as cover for exploitation. He saw how they convinced the world that enslaving Africans was actually civilizing them. He learned that the biggest lie of all was pretending to help while you robbed people blind. Leopold crafted a lie so convincing that the world's most powerful leaders fell for it completely. He formed the International African Association, presenting himself as a humanitarian dedicated to combating the Arab slave trade and bringing civilization to Africa. At the 1884 Berlin Conference, European powers carved up Africa like a birthday cake. France, Britain, Germany, Portugal. They were either deceived by Leopold's lies or willfully ignorant of the consequences. They handed him personal control of territory larger than Western Europe, convinced they were supporting a noble, charitable mission, or more likely, happy to let him do the dirty work they all wanted done. Behind closed doors, Leopold's plan was simple: turn this massive African territory into his personal money-making machine. But he couldn't have done it without European guns, European investors, and European silence. The 1890s brought Leopold the opportunity he'd been waiting for. Automobile manufacturing exploded. Industrial machinery needed rubber components. The price of rubber skyrocketed on international markets, and Congo's forests contained millions of rubber-producing vines. Leopold implemented the domain system, legal theft, disguised as colonial policy. All vacant land belonged to the state, which meant any land Africans weren't actively farming at that exact moment. Forests, hunting grounds, sacred sites, seasonal farming areas, Leopold claimed it all. He carved up these territories and handed them to private companies as concessions. The Anglo-Belgian India Rubber Company received 160,000 square kilometers. The Société Anversoise got comparable territory. These companies had one mandate: extract maximum rubber using any means necessary. The math was simple: force Congolese labor, pay virtually nothing, export rubber at enormous European markups. Leopold made 70 million Belgian francs between 1896 and 1905, billions in today's money. Speaking of massive profits built on African suffering, if you want to learn more about how European fortunes were extracted from our continent while they claimed to be bringing civilization, subscribe to Black Stories Untold. We're dedicated to exposing these economic crimes they tried to hide from you. The same extraction system stealing African wealth today, cobalt for your phones, lithium for electric cars, operate using Leopold's playbook. Now, back to the video. But forcing an entire population to work required an army. Leopold had the perfect solution. Leopold understood something that every oppressor throughout history has known. The most effective way to destroy a people is to turn them against each other. Leopold created the Force Publique by recruiting soldiers from across Africa, Bangala people from the Congo River, freed slaves from East Africa, even Zapo-Zaps known for their warrior culture and cannibalism. By 1900, these forces grew to 19,000 men. Leopold armed these soldiers with modern European rifles, placed them under white command, and gave them a choice: brutalize your own people or face the consequences yourself. Each village received impossible rubber quotas based solely on Leopold's profit margins, not actual rubber availability or village population. Meet the quota and survive. Fail and face consequences designed to break entire communities. Soldiers operated under strict ammunition accountability. Every bullet required proof of a killing by bringing back the victim's right hand. This policy created a grotesque currency system where severed hands became proof of productivity. Swambe, a survivor, described colonial administrator Leon Fieves. All blacks saw this man as the devil of the equator. From all the bodies killed in the field, you had to cut off the hands. He wanted to see the number of hands cut off by each soldier, who had to bring them in baskets. Hands were traded to make up for rubber shortfalls. Children's hands were taken as punishment when parents couldn't meet quotas. Living people had hands severed and were left to die from blood loss and infection. The system corrupted accountability into systematic mutilation. When villages refused rubber collection entirely, punitive expeditions arrived to send messages neighboring communities would never forget. Entire villages burned. Every adult male executed. Women and children hung on wooden palisades as warnings. The Zappo-Zap's reputation for cannibalism became a weapon of psychological warfare. Villages surrendered at news of their approach rather than face complete annihilation. But Leopold's cruelty extended beyond immediate terror tactics. He systematically destroyed African families and stole their children.
Every company station maintained prison camps, euphemistically called stockades, where wives, children, elderly parents, and village leaders were held hostage until rubber quotas were met. At stations like Bongadanga and Mompono, 3 to 10 prisoners died daily from horrific conditions. ABIR alone held 44 village chiefs prisoner in July 1902. Leopold created child colonies, kidnapping operations disguised as schools. Thousands of orphaned Congolese children were forcibly separated from remaining family members and sent to Catholic missions hundreds of miles away. These children were told, Papa l'État, Daddy the State, was now their father. African names were changed. Birth dates were altered. Connections to culture, language, and family were deliberately severed. More than 50% of children sent to these institutions died from disease, malnutrition, and neglect. In one documented march to a mission school, only 62 of 108 boys survived the journey. 8 survivors died within a week of arrival. Those who survived were trained as force publique soldiers or colonial servants, literally raising a generation of African children to become tools of their own people's oppression. The scale of death from Leopold's systematic campaign reveals the true horror of what happened in Congo. Disease epidemics ravaged communities torn apart by forced labor. Sleeping sickness alone killed 500,000 Congolese in 1901, more than 500,000 people dead from a single disease in 1 year. Families separated by rubber quotas couldn't maintain traditional farming practices, leading to famines that killed hundreds of thousands more. Birth rates plummeted as social structures collapsed. Traditional marriage and child-rearing practices were disrupted, meaning entire generations were lost, not just to death but to prevented births. Historians estimate the death toll between 1.5 and 13 million, with most scholars agreeing on approximately 10 million African lives lost, representing roughly half the total Congo Basin population. Conservative estimates still place Leopold's campaign among the largest mass exterminations in human history. Leopold personally profited 70 million Belgian francs, while companies saw profit margins exceeding 100% annually. As bodies piled up in Central Africa, a few brave witnesses began documenting evidence that would eventually expose these crimes to the world. George Washington Williams, an African-American journalist and Civil War veteran, traveled to Congo in 1890 and wrote the first international document calling the situation "crimes against humanity." Coining that phrase, British consul Roger Casement conducted detailed survivor interviews throughout the Congo, providing systematic documentation in his 1904 report to the British government. Alice Harris, a British missionary, photographed mutilated victims, including the famous image of Nsala staring at his 5-year-old daughter's severed hand and foot. E.D. Morel, a shipping clerk, noticed that ships left Congo loaded with rubber
but returned with only guns and ammunition, exposing the absence of legitimate trade. Leopold launched one of history's most sophisticated disinformation campaigns in response. He hired PR firms, bribed journalists, and created fake reform commissions staffed with loyalists who found no systematic abuses. Leopold established the Congo Museum, filled with exhibits showcasing his supposed humanitarian work. Even Leopold's own Commission of Inquiry confirmed systematic atrocities and widespread brutalization in 1904. Facing international pressure, Leopold transferred the Congo to Belgium in 1908, though many officials remained in position. Leopold died in 1909 as one of Europe's richest men, his fortune built on 10 million African lives. Belgium then began the greatest historical cover-up of the 20th century.
Belgium spent decades systematically destroying evidence.
Palace furnaces burned documents for over a week after Leopold's death. Colonial archives were sealed for decades, and when finally opened, crucial Congolese testimonies had mysteriously disappeared. World War I shifted global attention from African atrocities to European battlefields. Belgian textbooks rewrote Leopold as a civilizing hero. African resistance became savage rebellion against European modernization. Congolese voices were completely erased from historical records. This erasure was so successful that by the 1950s, most Europeans had no knowledge of Leopold's terror campaign. Universities taught African history as tribal conflicts resolved by beneficial European intervention. Systematic colonial exploitation became individual cases of administrative excess. Modern research shows areas under Leopold's concessions still have significantly lower education, health, and economic development. The Democratic Republic of Congo remains impoverished despite vast natural resources extracted by international corporations using systems echoing Leopold's model. In 2024, a Belgian court finally ruled that forced separation of mixed-race children constituted crimes against humanity, 70 years too late for thousands of destroyed families. Belgium's 2020 royal regret avoided mentioning Leopold by name while accepting no concrete responsibility.
Family. The same brutal patterns that enabled Leopold's mass extermination continue today. But here's what they didn't count on. Us. They didn't count on our generation that refuses to accept their sanitized version of history. They didn't count on us discovering the truth they tried so desperately to bury. Every time we share these stories, we're breaking their chains of ignorance. Every time we educate someone about how European wealth was really built, we're dismantling their propaganda machine. They kept this history from our textbooks because they knew something we're finally learning. Knowledge truly is power. Your schools, your universities, your educational system, they're all complicit in this cover-up. They must teach this history, and we must stay vigilant because these patterns of exploitation never stopped. From Congo's cobalt mines to Madagascar's land grabs, the system Leopold perfected is still destroying African lives for corporate profits. These 10 million Congolese ancestors weren't just statistics. They were brilliant minds, loving parents, skilled artisans, wise elders, and fierce warriors whose contributions to human civilization were stolen but never destroyed. Their blood flows through the soil of Africa. Their spirits live on in every act of resistance against oppression. And now their truth lives on through us. We are their voice. We are their legacy, refusing to be silenced. We are the ones making it happen. If you're ready to be part of this truth-telling revolution, hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with everyone who needs to hear it. Together, we're not just spreading knowledge, we're reclaiming power. We're honoring our ancestors by making sure their truth shakes the world. The revolution starts with the truth, and the truth starts with us.